Now, from Atlanta News First, this is Hurricane Season 2024, a First Alert weather special.
This is First Alert Weather Hurricane Season 2024. We are forecasting a very active hurricane season this year, and the First Alert Weather team wants to make sure you are prepared. Before we show you what we're expecting for this year's hurricane season, let's take a look back at 2023 and what we saw in last year's hurricane season. We had a subtropical storm form very early in the year on January 16th. Then we had our first named storm, which was Arlene. That formed on June 2nd. We're already past June 2nd, and we have not had a named storm quite yet. Brett formed shortly thereafter on June 19th. So we started off strong, and that continued through the entire year. In fact, you look at the past several years, and this shows you when we had our first named storm. Last year, it was June 2nd. In 2022, it was June 5th. In 2021, on May 23rd. In 2020, also in May, on May 17th. And 2019 in May on May 20th. This year, we are past all those dates with no named storms thus far. And although we haven't had much activity yet, unfortunately, we do not expect it to stay that way. First Alert meteorologist Ella Dorsey has more on what we're expecting in 2024.
NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, issues its hurricane outlook at the end of May every single year. And this year, they have issued one of the most bullish and unseasonably active seasons forecasts that I have ever seen. In fact, they're going with an 85% chance that we see an abnormally active season, an above average hurricane season this year, only a 10% chance of a near normal season, and only a very low 5% chance that we see less activity than average. Now, there's a lot of factors that they look at when they are making these hurricane predictions, and all of them are pointing to an above average season. So here are the actual numbers. In terms of named storms, typically in the Atlantic basin, we see 14 named storms per year. NOAA is predicting 17 to 25. That is almost double the typical season. Usually we see about 7 hurricanes, okay? Hurricanes have wind speeds of 74 miles per hour or higher. This season, NOAA is predicting 8 to 13 hurricanes in the Atlantic basin. And usually we see 3 major hurricanes, which are category 3 strength or higher. NOAA is predicting 4 to 7 major hurricanes this season. Here are the names upcoming. We will start the season with Alberto, then Beryl. We have Chris, Debbie, Ernesto, then Francine, Gordon, Helene. We have Isaac, Joyce, Kirk, Leslie, Milton, Nadine, and then Oscar, Patty, Raphael, Sarah, Tony, Valerie, and finally William. Now, usually, guys, in a typical season, if we get 14 named storms, we'll make it about to L, M, N. But in some years past, we've made it all the way through the alphabet, and we've had to start on the Greek alphabet. We had to do that in 2020. If this season plays out like NOAA is thinking it will, we will make it all the way through the alphabet with our named storms. Pretty incredible. So when do we see the most named storms? Well, it has a lot to do with the sea surface temperature. When the sea surface is at its warmest, that's when we see the most tropical formation. Those are in the summer months. That's why typically our hurricane season starts in June, where we see 6% of activity. So you can see June, July, less than 10% of the activities in each of those months. But August is when the ocean water really starts to warm up. We see a quarter of all tropical activity in August. We see a third of all our tropical activity in September. And even into October, the ocean stays pretty warm. We see a fifth, 20% of our activity in October. So September, mid-September is when we usually see peak hurricane formation. Where do these tropical systems form? Well, it changes throughout the year as the ocean warms. In the early and late months of hurricane season, the tropical formation is usually in shallower water because it's warmer. So when we start the clock in June, we usually see tropical formation in the Gulf, in the Caribbean, and along the East Coast. As we go into July, we actually see a good amount of formation in the mid to northern Atlantic. In August, we see a ton of activity way out in the Atlantic. So in the middle of the ocean is when we get a lot of those storm systems that roll all the way across the Atlantic into the Caribbean. We also see a decent amount of tropical formation along the east coast of the United States. September, a ton of activity in the mid-Atlantic and into the northern Atlantic. Also a decent amount in the Gulf. We see some storms form in the Gulf. In October, when the water starts to cool, we still see a good amount of tropical formation in all throughout the eastern Atlantic Sea. And then in November, believe it or not, the most activity is down towards central Georgia, so the Central America, down towards the southern Caribbean Sea.
A tropical system doesn't have to make landfall on the Georgia coast to have an impact for us here in North Georgia. Meteorologist Ella Dorsey has more on some impactful systems we've seen over the past several years.
I want to talk about sea surface temperatures because this year we've seen record warmth across all of the oceans across the globe. In fact, in February, the sea surface temperatures across the entire world were the highest ever recorded, and the current heat content at the end of May was what it should be in August. So we're seeing very warm, abnormally warm water. You need water 80 degrees or above to sustain hurricanes. At the end of May, before hurricane season even started, most of the Gulf was above that 80-degree mark, and even parts of the Atlantic coastline in Georgia, we're nearing that 80-degree mark, which is usually something that doesn't occur until July and into August. This is the sea surface temperature anomaly. I just want to show you this to give you some perspective. Every area that you see in yellow and orange is above average temperatures. The temperatures are warmer than usual, and you can see that is all of the Gulf, all of the Caribbean, and most of the Atlantic. And especially in those lower latitudes where hurricanes form, the sea surface temperatures are warmer than average. That is going to help promote activity, and it's also going to help intensify these storms when they do form. So that is one of the reasons that NOAA predicted an above average season. Let's talk about the other ingredients you need. We just talked about water surface temperatures above 80 degrees. You also need converging winds that force air upwards. That really is formed by thunderstorms. Any clusters of thunderstorms you'll have rising air. And that's why when we see these storms roll off of Africa, the African waves, they really help promote tropical formation. They'll come off of the continent into the Atlantic. You have that rising air, and that helps promote formation. You also need a lot of moisture. And the other thing that's really interesting that you need for hurricane formation is very low-level wind shear, which is winds moving really in the same direction at low speeds at high levels in the atmosphere. Basically, if you have high winds, like where planes fly, if you have high winds up there, it tears apart those tropical systems. So light winds high up in the atmosphere really helps these tropical systems organize themselves. So those are the main ingredients. Now, I can tell you, we just talked about the water temperature above 80, but the wind shear in El Nino and La Nina years is a lot different. So you guys know we talk about El Nino, La Nina a lot. We're currently coming out of a pretty strong El Nino and heading into a La Nina. And you can see in La Nina years, the hurricane formation is the highest. The reason is because in La Nina years, that wind shear at upper levels in the atmosphere, it lessens in the summer. So that helps tropical formation. So that's another reason that NOAA is predicting an above average season. All of these factors are working together to give us a signal that this year could be very active. It could end up being similar to 2020, which is an extremely active year. Again, we were in a La Nina in 2020, and we just had a lot of ingredients working together. 30 named storms. We went well into the Greek alphabet. We had 14 hurricanes in 7 major hurricanes. That is very similar to what NOAA is predicting for us this year. The last couple of years have not been as bad, but you guys know it only takes one hurricane to impact land. And even though there has not been that many named storms in the last few years, we've seen a major hurricane impact the United States every single year. Last year was Ian, and it really ripped apart the Fort Myers area. So all you need is one storm. We know that. Now, here in North Georgia, we don't see a direct impact from hurricanes, but a lot of times we get the remnants, right? Either tropical storms or depressions moving through. Wanted to take you through the last couple of years, storms that have impacted us here locally in North Georgia. In 2022, we had Tropical Depression Nicole. 2021, we had Tropical Depression Fred. I remember that one. It spawned like 6-7 tornadoes, okay? 2021, we had Tropical Depression Claudette. But in 2020, in late October, beginning of November, I believe, we had a storm, Tropical Storm Zeta, move through. It moved through North Georgia. I remember tens of thousands of people lost power. We had significant power outages and downed trees. So even though we don't see impacts from hurricane strength winds, even the remnants of these storms do impact us very frequently in the fall months here in North Georgia. And again, 2020 was a very active season. We're predicting a season very close to that. So we could definitely see impacts here locally from the storm system. Again, there's plenty of months in hurricane season. So we will just have to see how it pans out.
The First Alert Weather Team is prepared to walk you through each and every storm that may have an impact for us here in North Georgia or across the southeastern United States. First Alert meteorologist Courtney Jacobazzi, she's traveled to the coast multiple times, and she has an insider look of what it's like to cover a storm.
Two of the most memorable storms for me over the last couple of years have been major hurricanes Ian and Idalia. Ian devastating the southwest coast of Florida, and Idalia bringing conditions to the Big Bend region of the state that they hadn't experienced in decades. I had the opportunity to cover both of those storms in real time down in Florida and wanted to give a little insight on what it's like to prepare to cover major hurricanes.
First Alert meteorologist Courtney Jacobazzi reports from Fort Myers, where people are still scrambling to try and find loved ones and some supplies.
People who live along the coast are used to the threat of tropical systems, but with how quickly Hurricane Ian's path changed, people who live here had very little time to prepare for this. I'm First Alert meteorologist Courtney Jacobazzi, still in Perry, Florida, where good signs are happening. Behind me, a Walmart that is now open for people to come and get any kind of necessities. The planning process is super important. Myself, along with our team of First Alert meteorologists, monitor forecasts and discussions from the National Hurricane Center, as well as carefully analyze model data in order to determine where the storm will make direct landfall, what kind of impacts it will bring, but most importantly, where my crew and I can go to stay safe. Once we figure that out, we of course have to find a hotel that isn't closing up shop and is willing to take media to cover the storm. Places that fit that criteria are usually further inland, safe from storm surge, which of course can be one of the deadliest threats from a landfalling hurricane. Then of course we need to pack plenty of water, batteries, non-perishable food and snacks, and plenty of cash, because of course grocery stores either closed up from the storm, end up with damage, and credit card machines along with cell service, that all goes out. So when stores and gas stations start opening again after the storm, cash is usually the only option to be able to pay for those amenities. We always arrive the day before the storm to settle in and talk to people about how they're preparing. And when it comes to these two storms, you could sense kind of the angst in the residents, as they hadn't experienced hurricanes of this magnitude, again, in decades. When it comes to Ian and Southwest Florida, in fact, it had been more than 100 years since they were bracing for a hurricane of that magnitude. Now, sandbags are always being placed, boards are being put on windows, and everything is brought to higher ground as the wind starts to pick up. And people try to keep their hopes up that the storm will pass quickly and not destroy the things that they've worked so hard for. Now, during the storm is when the adrenaline really kicks in. The wind is roaring, the power flickers, and usually ultimately goes out, and it brings the most eerie darkness without light from the sun. You've never seen stars so bright, and you've never felt kind of, again, such an eerie feeling when night falls and all the lights are out. Now, I also have to analyze the direction the wind is blowing. That's where my meteorology skills come in, and watch as the storm moves inland, because the wind direction will shift in that process. And that's important because we have to place our news crews and our van kind of against the wind. And the van ultimately serves as a shield to block some of that wind, of course, any flying debris. We also usually stand really close to an overhang to stand under to protect ourselves further. In my case, I have to place sandbags over my rain boots to keep myself grounded. In fact, that was really important when I was in the eye of Hurricane Idalia with winds over 100 miles per hour back in 2023. The wind was whipping and roaring. I had never experienced anything like it in my life. And needless to say, that would make someone my size a little vulnerable and unsteady. Now, after the storm, it's about connecting and helping. We try to help residents find resources and listen to their stories about riding out the hurricane so we can tell them to you.
And what was their experience as they rode through the hurricane?
We talked to a handful of people that live in this town, and some of those homes are just about a block to my left. And a lot of them were, of course, saying that was one of the scariest things that they've ever been through. Some people said that while they were in their home and the storm was rolling in, they were on the lower level of their home, which is a smart thing to do, and they heard the windows breaking in the upper levels of their homes. So a lot of people were saying it was just scary to hear everything.
One story in particular really stands out from covering Ian down in Fort Myers. A family had to evacuate their home and get on their boat that was already floating at this point on its trailer as the floodwaters rose, and they actually saved people swimming in the water trying to get to higher ground as they were navigating their boat through the street that no longer could harbor cars, but only boats. The sights are undoubtedly devastating, and the stories that come out of hurricane coverage can both break your heart and fulfill you through the showing of humanity that people offer in that time. Another lesson, and one that we will say every year, is that both of these storms are proof that it can only take one storm, no matter how active the season is. I'm First Alert meteorologist Courtney Jacobazzi.
The First Alert weather team wants to make sure you are prepared in 2024. First Alert meteorologist Cutter Martin has more on what you need to have in your safety kit in case the storm hits.
Trees and power lines, they do not mix. Even a glancing blow from a tropical storm or minimal hurricane can cause widespread, long-duration power outages across North Georgia, and now is the time to prepare. It doesn't take all that much wind to bring down trees and cause power outages. 30 to 50 mile-per-hour gusts can easily knock out power, let alone sustain tropical storm force winds. In a worst-case scenario, power could be out for many days across portions of North Georgia. Long-duration power outages can impact the water supply, too. Make sure you have at least 1 gallon of water per person per day for at least 3 days. And you do not have to spend the big bucks to keep your family safe and ready to go during the next storm. Take a portion of the water that you should have purchased in the days leading up to the power outage, day of, hours before the power going out. Put it in the freezer. As it melts, it will keep your food colder for longer, and you'll use it as drinking water. You can fill your bathtub with water for things like flushing toilets and cleaning. Stock up on non-perishable food items like canned tuna and meats, crackers, and peanut butter, enough to last a few days. Use flashlights instead of burning candles to light your home. Have a couple on hand and make sure you have enough batteries to keep any battery-dependent electronics working for several days. Don't forget about your cell phone. A mobile device may be the only way to receive severe weather updates once the power goes out. You can charge it in your car or look online. There are many charging options. Some charging devices even operate using solar power. If you are assembling a supply kit today, shop around. Retailers may offer discounts. Georgia does not have any tax-free periods for disaster supplies, but Alabama and Florida do. For a complete checklist, visit AtlantaNewsFirst.com.
If you lose power, the best tool you can have is the Atlanta News First Alert Weather app. You can watch the forecast on your phone, but more importantly, you can see the radar, the future radar, the hour-by-hour forecast, and the First Alert Weather app will alert you if a strong thunderstorm, a severe thunderstorm, heavy rain, or lightning is approaching your area. All you have to do is search First Alert Weather in the App Store. You can get it on your Android device as well. That is the best way to have the Southeast's largest team of meteorologists right in your pocket whenever you want us, including right now. First Alert meteorologist Cutter Martin, he's standing by, and he's here to answer any questions you may have about the 2024 hurricane season.
And thank you for watching Hurricane Season 2024, the special put together by many members of the Atlanta News First team. I'm joined by Maria Moreau. Maria, obviously busy season ahead, and we're continuing to show people how they can remain informed through hurricane season, whether a storm threatens North Georgia or not.
Yeah, certainly, Cutter. And just as you saw from this special that our First Alert weather team put together, this is all about preparedness, making sure that you are ready, that you have the tools in your hand and a game plan with your family and loved ones in the event of severe weather. That's what we're here for. That's what our First Alert meteorologists do day in and day out for you.
And one way that you can remain informed, even if you're on the go, in the First Alert weather app, but also, if you're sitting at the office, you see a headline talking about a tropical something developing in the Atlantic. AtlantaNewsFirst.com, a good web page. In fact, this time of year, during hurricane season, we do change up the page a little bit, Maria, and we do add a specific page dedicated to tropical updates. And folks are looking at the website right now.
Yeah, certainly. That website, by the way, not only do you get your daily weather reports out of there, but First Alert weather days, that is where you're going to get information, not only from our First Alert weather team on what you need to do to prepare, but also our digital team here at Atlanta News First. We track every single update across the metro Atlanta community. So we will tell you about power outages, trees down in communities that you might be crossing through, whether you're a motorist on the road or this is your neighborhood being affected. We are telling the stories of those impacted by these severe weather events because community is really the key during these moments, being prepared together and making sure that you're checking in on your people.
And one way that you can check in with the latest information, again, is on the website, AtlantaNewsFirst.com. We were just viewing that, and we've added a tropical tab. So you're going to go to First Alert Weather, Maria, and just click on that tropical tab there on AtlantaNewsFirst.com. And I'm seeing a couple comments actually on YouTube, just people were letting us know where they're watching, and I think that kind of drives home the point that even outside of news time, when we're away from the studio, we're still working to bring you the latest forecasts, latest informations, and on streams like this one, you can expect many more of those during hurricane season, especially if there is a regional threat. AtlantaNewsFirst.com. As mentioned, the First Alert weather app, Atlanta News First app, Roku, Amazon Fire, any streaming location, you can get the latest forecast, latest updates if a system does threaten our area.
Cutter, I'm glad you brought up Atlanta News First Plus. Obviously, I'm a big fan of this resource that we can make available to folks outside of when we are on the air, and we will be on the air during major severe weather events, of course, but this is a tool for us to connect with you guys, to answer your questions, to tell you what's going on live as it happens with the most up-to-the-minute information so that you can make a plan. I think recently, Cutter, you and I were up here during a severe weather event, and we had folks telling us, what they were seeing outside of their front doors and what they were experiencing, and we were able to get them the information they needed, the questions they had, and put resources in their hands to not only make them feel safe, but make them feel prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, no matter where you are leading up to a system, or if you just want to check on the latest information for regional friends, and maybe have a place that you visit down in the Florida Panhandle, examples like that, this is a good place to get your specific questions answered. Atlanta News First Plus coming to you live every day, but even more often during hurricane season and during times of severe weather. Maria, doesn't look like we have too many questions out there, and want to remind folks that we do have this special. If you missed it and you want to see it in its entirety, we do have that available even after the conclusion of this stream, right?
I thought for the folks that did join us today, we would tell them about the First Alert weather app. This is a tool that I even use as a news consumer, as a weather consumer, to plan out my weekends, to get ready for severe weather event. Cutter, this is a very personalized app that you yourself and the rest of the First Alert weather team are hands-on with, and it's weather explanations in a way that makes sense to the everyday person that's just trying to make a plan.
Yeah, and then if you do want to get away from the actual forecast and you would just like to see the preview of the season, First Alert meteorologist Ella Dorsey's forecast of the season, this special will be available online at AtlantaNewsFirst.com. In fact, we did have that. You can see the clip on the homepage, and you can catch the stream, the entire special, I should say, at AtlantaNewsFirst.com. It will live there, it will stay there, and it will be on that Tropics tab that we were just telling you about. If you do want to get the latest forecast and you did miss the special in its entirety streaming just a few moments ago.
With that, I know we have a heat wave coming up this weekend, Cutter. As the first alert meteorologist that we have here on Atlanta News First Plus, any words of advice and tips for the folks watching?
It's summertime and it's going to be hot, so hit the pool, stay hydrated, and actually the good news is this ridge of high pressure that's giving us such gorgeous weather out there. Though hot, it's actually protecting us from a couple of systems that we're watching. Not developed yet, but we're already watching a couple things in the Atlantic. You saw the latest tropical update at noon. None threatening North Georgia, none impacting Metro Atlanta. But this heat wave, the weather pattern that's creating it, is protecting us for the time being from any sort of tropical impact. So, of course, good news. But if anything changes, we'll let you know.
Thanks so much for joining us. We want to bring you back to that website, atlantanewsfirst.com. That is going to be your resource for better understanding and better preparing for this upcoming hurricane season and all that's coming from that.
Stay with us. We'll keep you updated.